it is a never-ending debate about who is the GOAT, greatest of all time in chess history. Many names come up in one's mind like Morphy, Alekhine, Lasker, Fischer, Karpov, Kasparov, and Carlsen. But usually, the two names that come up the most, Kasparov and Carlsen, due to many reasons like longevity, dominance, rating, difference than others, and the amount of times they won the World Championships. Although Kasparov has more World Championships than Magnus has the highest peak rating reached by any human player. One can also argue that Kasparov won more classical games than Magnus, but we cannot forget the fact that Magnus plays in an era where every other player has a strong chess engine to do preparation for, which increases overall difficulty and level of the game. Therefore, to give a better glimpse between them, we will now see one of the only two classical games played between them. This game was played when Magnus was only 13 years old and Kasparov, though not at his peak, was still strong. The game begins with Magnus playing with white pieces and playing 1 d4 and Kasparov responding by playing 1 d5 and asking Carlsen whether he wants to play 2 c4. Because at top level, players are very well prepared against 1 d4, 2 c4. Carlsen, though, was not scared by this fact and played 2 c4 and Kasparov played the Slav defense by playing 2 c6. After a couple of theory moves being played, the position turns into a queen's gambit declined, with white playing the move 6 d3. Kasparov now plays the move 9 e5, trying to either get some hold of the center, as until now, Carlsen has the hold of center of the board, or exchange it with Carlsen's d-pawn and give him an isolated pawn. Carlsen, though, ignores the threat and simply castles. Kasparov exchanged the e-pawn for the d-pawn, and Carlsen, rather than taking the pawn back first, puts his knight from d2 to b3. Because if he takes the pawn back immediately, then Kasparov will take his c-pawn with his d-pawn, and Carlsen won't be able to capture the pawn back with his bishop, because his bishop on g5 will be left hanging. After a few more moves, Carlsen sees that he has an open e-file available for his rook, so he immediately seizes the opportunity and gets hold of the open file. Kasparov responds by playing his pawn to h6 and asking Carlsen whether he wants to exchange the bishop for the knight or retreat it. Carlsen, obviously wanting to keep his bishop pair, retreats his bishop to h4. Kasparov retreats his bishop to d6 and aligning it with the queen to put pressure on h2 pawn, but Carlsen calmly plays h3, protecting his pawn. After a few more moves and exchanges, Kasparov makes the first inaccuracy of the game by retreating his knight to d6 rather than b6. Carlsen, realizing the opportunity, plays the queen to c5, which is a strong move. But there was a stronger move in the position which would have put too much pressure on Kasparov, and that was d5. Here, Kasparov plays his queen to g6, attacking the pawn on g2. And Carlsen, rather than keeping his queen on the center of the board and playing f3, offers a queen trade, which even though is not a bad move, but it increases the chances of black to hold the position exponentially. Kasparov quickly exchanges the queen, and we move to an endgame where Carlsen is up a pawn but has doubled g-pawns. Even though white is up a pawn in the endgame, it objectively looks like a draw, but after Carlsen's move 35, bishop to c3, the position is a draw because of the fact that black will also get activity. Carlsen instead should have played his rook to d6, keeping his pieces on the offensive side. But after Carlsen's inaccuracy, Kasparov also makes an inaccuracy by exchanging the rook on e5. He should have played rook e to b8 to attack the pawn on the b-file and win it. The endgame continued for a while, with Carlsen being the one pushing for the win until he made an inaccuracy on move 51, which immediately allowed Kasparov to draw the game. Carlsen plays his rook to c6, Kasparov can play his bishop to f1, and now there is no way to protect the pawn on g2, because even though white can play his bishop to f2, but then his a-pawn will hang. Both players, realizing the game is fizzled out to a draw, shaked hands and agreed to a draw. This was a phenomenal feat by a mere 13-year-old Magnus Carlsen, who withheld a 6-time world champion Garry Kasparov to a draw. This clearly showed the potential Carlsen had and showed great prospects for his future.